Far away from Earth, on a barren alien planet covered in ash and jagged rocks, the war had been raging for decades. The humans called it the Vrax War, named after the coalition of hostile alien species that sought to wipe humanity from the stars. For years, battles had torn through space and across strange worlds, leaving destruction in their wake. But now, something felt different. The air was heavy with anticipation. Lieutenant Jason Cole stood near the edge of a massive crater, staring at the ruins of what had once been an outpost. His armor was scratched and worn, evidence of countless skirmishes. He adjusted the helmet under his arm and let out a slow breath. The silence around him was eerie. No explosions, no screams, no hum of energy weapons charging. Just the faint whistle of wind sweeping over the desolate landscape. It was unsettling. Behind him, the human warship U.S. Invincible loomed like a steel giant against the dark sky. Its sleek surface gleamed faintly under the light of a distant sun. The ship was humanity's pride, equipped with advanced weaponry and faster-than-light engines. Yet even its presence couldn't shake the feeling of dread that hung over the crew. They all knew they were losing this war. Slowly, but surely, the Vrax consortium was gaining ground. Jason turned back toward the ship. Inside, Captain Laura Hayes was already preparing for the next battle. She was a tall woman with sharp features and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through anyone who crossed her path. Her voice carried authority, and her decisions had saved lives more times than anyone could count. Still, she wasn't invincible. No one was. Even she looked tired these days. As Jason climbed aboard, he passed rows of soldiers repairing damaged equipment or tending to the wounded. Some sat quietly, lost in thought. Others joked nervously, trying to keep spirits up. Jason nodded to a few familiar faces as he made his way to the command center. There, Captain Hayes stood surrounded by holographic displays showing maps of nearby star systems. One map showed a cluster of red dots, Vrax ships gathering near their homeworld. "We've got a problem," Hayes said without looking up. Her tone was calm but firm. "Intelligence reports confirm they're building another fleet, bigger than anything we've faced before." Jason frowned. "How long do we have?" "Not long enough." Hayes finally looked at him, her expression grim. "If they launch that fleet, Earth won't stand a chance. We need to hit them first, while they're still vulnerable." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. Another risky mission. Another gamble with lives. Jason glanced at the others in the room. A mix of officers and engineers, all waiting for orders. He admired their determination, even if it came tinged with fear. They weren't fighting just for themselves. They were fighting for the billions of people back on Earth who depended on them. Later that evening, Jason found himself sitting alone in the mess hall. The food was bland, as usual, but it didn't matter. What weighed on him wasn't hunger. It was guilt. Guilt for every friend he lost, every decision he hadn't been able to change. He thought about his sister, Sarah, living safely on Earth. Would she ever forgive him if he didn't come back? Or would she understand why he stayed? Before he could dwell too long, Ensign Emily Dawson slid into the seat across from him. She was young, barely out of training, but her mind worked like a machine when it came to engineering. Her blonde hair was tied back in a messy bun, and grease stains marked her uniform. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the galaxy," she said with a small smile. Jason chuckled weakly. "Feels like I am." Emily tilted her head. "You know, sometimes I think about what happens after the war. When we win." "When we win?" Jason raised an eyebrow. "That's optimistic." "It has to be," Emily replied. "Otherwise, what's the point?" Her words stuck with him long after she left. Maybe she was right. Maybe hope was the only thing keeping any of them going. As Jason stared out the window at the endless expanse of stars, he realized how much rested on their shoulders. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the future. And somehow, they had to believe they could win. The command center aboard the U.S. Invincible buzzed with activity As officers moved quickly between stations, their faces tense but focused. Captain Laura Hayes stood at the center of it all, her sharp gaze scanning the holographic displays that floated around her. The red dots marking the Vrax fleet had grown denser over the past few hours. It was clear now. They were building something big, and time was running out. Jason Cole entered the room, his boots clicking softly against the metal floor. He took his place near Hayes, waiting for her to speak. Around them, the hum of machinery mixed with the occasional beep of a console. Everyone knew this meeting would determine their next move, and possibly the fate of humanity. Hayes turned to face the group. "We've intercepted communications from the Vrax," she began, her voice steady, but carrying an edge of urgency. "They're planning a massive assault on Earth within 2 weeks. If we let them launch that fleet, we won't have a chance to stop them." A murmur rippled through the room. Major Ryan Carter, a broad-shouldered man with graying hair, stepped forward. His expression was skeptical. 2 weeks isn't enough time to prepare a counterattack, Captain. We're already stretched thin. Any misstep could mean disaster." "I agree," said Lieutenant Rachel Moore, a strategist known for her cautious approach. She adjusted her glasses and pointed to one of the maps. "Even if we mobilize every available ship, we'll still be outnumbered. Their technology is too advanced." Hayes listened patiently, her jaw tightening slightly. When the murmurs died down, she spoke again. "We don't have a choice. If we wait, they'll crush us. But if we strike first, hit them while they're still assembling, we might stand a chance." Jason felt a knot form in his stomach. Striking first sounded bold, even heroic, but he couldn't ignore the risks. He glanced at Emily Dawson, who stood quietly near the back of the room, her arms crossed. Her usual optimism seemed muted today, replaced by a look of quiet determination. "What's the plan?" Jason asked finally, breaking the silence. Hayes nodded toward him. "We'll jump into hyperspace and ambush them near their staging point. We'll split the fleet into 2 groups, one to distract the main force, and another to target their supply lines and command ships. Without those, they'll fall apart." Carter frowned. "Splitting the fleet is dangerous. What happens if the distraction fails? We'll lose half our forces before we even get close." "It's a risk," Hayes admitted, "but it's the only way. If we can cut off their resources and disrupt their chain of command, we'll weaken them enough to turn the tide." The room fell silent as everyone considered the plan. It was risky, almost reckless, but no one could deny its potential. Slowly, heads began to nod. They didn't have many options left. After the meeting ended, Jason found himself walking alongside Emily toward the engineering bay. Neither of them spoke at first, lost in thought. Finally, Emily broke the silence. "Do you think it'll work?" she asked, her voice soft. Jason shrugged. "I don't know. It's risky, but so is sitting back and doing nothing. At least this gives us a fighting chance." Emily sighed. "I just wish there was another way. So many people are going to die." Her words hung in the air, heavy and true. Jason didn't have an answer for her. Instead, he reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. "All we can do is try our best. That's all anyone's ever asked of us." Later that night, Jason lay awake in his quarters, staring at the ceiling. The weight of the mission pressed down on him, making it hard to breathe. He thought about the soldiers under his command, about Emily and her dreams of rebuilding after the war. He thought about Earth, so far away yet always in his heart. For a moment, doubt crept in. Could they really pull this off? Or were they walking straight into a trap? But then he remembered Emily's words from earlier. Hope. Even in the darkest moments, hope kept them moving forward. As the ship's engines rumbled faintly in the background, Jason closed his eyes and tried to rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. For now, though, he held on to the belief that somehow, someway, they would find a way to win. The U.S. Invincible hummed with energy as it prepared to jump into hyperspace. The crew moved quickly, their steps echoing through the corridors as they carried out final checks on weapons, shields, and engines. Everyone knew what was at stake. This wasn't just another mission. It was humanity's last hope. Jason Cole stood on the bridge, watching the countdown timer tick away. Outside the viewport, stars stretched endlessly across the void, cold and distant. He felt a strange mix of excitement and dread twisting in his chest. Beside him, Captain Laura Hayes gave calm orders, her voice steady despite the tension hanging thick in the air. "Engines are ready," announced Ensign Emily Dawson from her station. Her fingers flew over the console, double-checking readings for the experimental weapon system she had spent months perfecting. "Shields are holding steady. We're good to go." Hayes nodded. "Helm, prepare for hyperspace jump. Let's get this done." "Aye, Captain," replied Lieutenant Rachel Moore, gripping the controls tightly. She glanced back at the crew, her face pale but resolute. "All hands, brace for transition." As the countdown reached 0, the ship shuddered violently, and the view outside the viewport blurred into streaks of light. For a moment, everything seemed to stretch and twist, pulling them forward faster than the speed of light. Then, just as suddenly, the shaking stopped, and the stars reappeared, different ones now, farther from home. Jason let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "That never gets easier." Emily smirked faintly. "You'd think after all these jumps, you'd be used to it by now." Before Jason could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Red warning lights flashed on the consoles, and the crew snapped into action. Something was wrong. "What's happening?" Hayes demanded sharply. "One of our sensors picked up an anomaly ahead," Rachel reported, her eyes scanning the data. "It looks like debris. And, wait, there are ships out there, not wracks." Jason frowned. "Not wracks? Who else would be here?" "No idea," Rachel replied. "But they're not moving. They might be disabled, or worse." Captain Hayes crossed her arms, her expression thoughtful. "Send a probe to investigate. We need to know who or what we're dealing with before we proceed." Minutes later, the probe returned images of battered alien vessels drifting silently in space. Some were little more than wrecks, their hulls cracked open and exposed to the vacuum. Others appeared intact but dark, lifeless. It was clear they weren't wracks designs. These ships belonged to other species, ones humanity had once considered allies. "They were betrayed," said Major Ryan Carter, stepping onto the bridge. His voice was grim. "These are Kalian ships. They fought alongside us until the wracks turned on them." Jason felt a chill run down his spine. The Kalians had been strong allies during the early years of the war. To see their fleet reduced to ruins was sobering and deeply unsettling. "We can't leave them like this," Emily said softly, breaking the silence. "If there's anyone still alive, we have to help them." Hayes hesitated, weighing the risks. Helping survivors could slow them down, but abandoning allies, even former ones, went against everything humanity stood for. Finally, she made her decision. "Prepare a boarding party," she ordered. "Jason, you're leading it. Bring medics and engineers. If anyone's alive, bring them aboard. If not," she paused, her jaw tightening, "salvage what you can. We may need it." Jason nodded and turned to leave, motioning for Emily to join him. Together, they gathered a small team and suited up in protective gear. As they boarded one of the shuttles, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Why had the wracks left these ships here? What were they hiding? The shuttle approached the largest wreck, its surface scarred and blackened from battle. Jason led the way inside, his rifle at the ready. The interior was eerily quiet, the only sound the creak of metal as the ship shifted slightly in the void. Dust floated in the air, catching the dim light from their helmets. "Stay sharp," Jason whispered into the comms. "We don't know what we'll find." They moved cautiously through the corridors, checking rooms and compartments. Most were empty, stripped bare, or destroyed. But then, In a dimly lit chamber, they found something unexpected. A lone figure slumped against a wall, barely breathing. "He's alive," Emily exclaimed, rushing to his side. She checked his vitals while Jason kept watch. The alien was tall and thin, with shimmering blue skin and large, unblinking eyes. Acalian. Slowly, the alien opened his mouth and spoke in broken English. "The weapon. Destroy it." "What weapon?" Jason asked urgently. "What are you talking about?" But the Kalian didn't answer. His head lolled to the side, unconscious, or worse. Jason exchanged a worried glance with Emily. Whatever the Kalian meant, it couldn't be good. And if the Vrax had something powerful enough to wipe out an entire fleet, humanity's odds of victory had just gotten even slimmer. Back aboard the U.S. Invincible, the Kalian survivor was rushed to the medical bay. His condition was critical, but Dr. Alan Parks, the ship's chief physician, worked tirelessly to stabilize him. The alien's injuries were severe: burns, fractures, and internal damage, but his will to live seemed unbreakable. As Jason and Emily waited outside the med bay, they couldn't stop thinking about the cryptic warning he had given before collapsing. "The weapon. Destroy it." Those words echoed in their minds, heavy with meaning they didn't fully understand yet. Captain Laura Hayes arrived soon after, her expression unreadable. She glanced at Jason and Emily before stepping into the med bay to speak with Dr. Parks. A few minutes later, she emerged, her face pale but determined. "He's stable, for now," Hayes said. "But we need answers. Whatever that weapon is, it's clearly dangerous. And if the Vrax have it, we're in trouble." Jason nodded. "Do you think he'll be able to tell us more?" "He will," Hayes replied firmly. "Once he's conscious, we'll find out everything he knows." For the next several hours, the crew prepared for the possibility of facing this mysterious weapon. Engineers ran simulations, strategists plotted contingencies, and soldiers sharpened their skills in training modules. The tension aboard the ship was palpable, like a storm waiting to break. Finally, the Kalian regained consciousness. He lay weakly on the bed, his large eyes flickering open as Dr. Parks adjusted the oxygen mask over his face. Hayes entered the room, followed by Jason and Emily. They gathered around him, their expressions serious. "You're safe now," Hayes said gently. "We found you among the wreckage. Can you tell us what happened?" The Kalian took a shaky breath, then spoke haltingly in broken English. "Vrax betrayed us, used our ships as bait. Weapon, unimaginable power." Emily leaned forward slightly, her voice soft but urgent. "What kind of weapon? Where is it?" The alien hesitated, pain flashing across his features. "Super weapon. Feeds on life. Sentient beings. Amplifies destruction. Unstoppable." A chill swept through the room. Jason exchanged a glance with Hayes, who looked grim. "Where is it?" she asked again. "Near homeworld. Hidden station. Vrax guard it fiercely." Hayes straightened, her mind racing. If the weapon truly existed, and if it worked the way the Kalian described, it could change everything. Humanity's plan to ambush the Vrax fleet suddenly felt even riskier. Attacking them head-on might not be enough. They'd need to neutralize the superweapon first. "We can't ignore this," Hayes said once they left the medbay. "If that thing is real, it's the key to stopping the Vrax. But getting to it won't be easy." Jason frowned. "How do we even get close? If it's guarded, we'll be walking into a trap." "That's why we'll split the fleet," Hayes explained. "One group will create a diversion, drawing the Vrax forces away from the station. The other will go after the weapon. It's risky, but it's our best shot." Emily spoke up, her voice tinged with worry. "And if something goes wrong? If we can't disable it?" Hayes met her gaze steadily. "Then we make sure none of us are taken alive. We can't let them use it against Earth." As the plan began to take shape, the crew worked tirelessly to prepare. Weapons were checked, shields reinforced, and escape routes mapped. Everyone knew the stakes had just risen higher. Failure wasn't an option, not when the fate of humanity rested on their shoulders. That night, Jason stood alone in the observation deck, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. The weight of the mission pressed heavily on him, but he tried to focus on the bigger picture. If they succeeded, if they destroyed the weapon, they might finally turn the tide of the war. Behind him, Emily joined quietly, leaning against the railing. "You okay?" she asked softly. Jason sighed. "I don't know. This feels like gambling with lives. What if we're wrong about this?" Emily smiled faintly. "We've been gambling since day one. At least this time, we're rolling the dice with purpose." Her words brought a small sense of comfort. Jason nodded slowly. "Let's hope luck is on our side." Tension filled the air aboard the U.S. Invincible as the crew prepared for their most dangerous mission yet. The plan was set. One group would distract the Vrax fleet, while another sneaked toward the hidden station housing the superweapon. But even with careful preparation, unease lingered. Something felt off. Jason Cole sat at a console in the engineering bay, reviewing data logs and communications traffic. He had volunteered to help Ensign Emily Dawson monitor the systems, knowing how critical it was to keep everything running smoothly. As he scrolled through the files, something caught his eye. A series of encrypted messages sent from the ship's internal network to an unknown location. "Emily," Jason said, frowning, "take a look at this." Emily leaned over, her brow furrowing as she studied the screen. "That's not normal. Who authorized these transmissions?" "No one," Jason replied. "They're coming from inside the ship." A sinking feeling settled in Emily's stomach. If someone's leaking intel to the Vrax, we're walking into a trap. Without wasting time, they reported their findings to Captain Laura Hayes. She listened intently, her sharp eyes narrowing as she processed the information. "Find out who's behind this," she ordered. "We can't afford any weaknesses right now." Jason and Emily worked quickly, tracing the source of the transmissions. It didn't take long to narrow it down to a single terminal located in the communications hub. Armed with evidence, they headed there, moving cautiously through the corridors. When they arrived, they found Communications Officer Peterson typing furiously at his station. "Peterson," Jason called out sharply. "What are you doing?" Peterson froze, his face pale. He turned slowly, guilt written all over his features. I can explain." "You've been sending classified data to the enemy," Emily accused, stepping closer. "Why?" Peterson hesitated, then slumped into his chair, defeated. "They have my family," he admitted, his voice trembling. "The Vrax captured them months ago. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd kill them." Jason clenched his fists, anger bubbling inside him. "You put everyone on this ship at risk." "I didn't have a choice," Peterson shouted back, desperation in his tone. "You don't know what it's like to lose everything." Hayes arrived moments later, having been alerted by Emily. She took in the scene with a cold gaze. "Lock him up," she ordered. "We'll deal with him later." As Peterson was led away, Hayes turned to Jason and Emily. "This changes nothing. We still move forward with the plan. But now we know the Vrax might be expecting us." Jason nodded grimly. "We'll just have to be smarter than them." Preparations continued, but the discovery of the traitor cast a shadow over the crew. Trust was fragile now, and everyone felt the weight of suspicion. Still, there was no turning back. The fleet split into two groups as planned. Major Ryan Carter led the diversionary force, taking half the ships to engage the Vrax fleet head-on. Their job was to draw attention away from the second group, which included the Invincible. Captain Hayes commanded the stealth team, guiding them toward the hidden station. The journey was tense, with every sensor sweep revealing potential threats. Jason stayed close to Emily, both of them acutely aware that one mistake could mean disaster. Finally, the station came into view, a massive structure floating silently in space. Its surface was covered in strange markings and pulsating energy conduits. It looked alien and menacing, like something out of a nightmare. "This is it," Hayes said quietly. "Let's disable that weapon before they realize we're here." The boarding party suited up and boarded shuttles, heading for the station. As they approached, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The silence around them was unnatural, almost suffocating. When they docked and entered the station, the air was thick with static electricity. Strange lights flickered along the walls, casting eerie shadows. Every step felt heavier, as though the place itself resisted their presence. "This doesn't feel right," Emily whispered, gripping her toolkit tightly. "It never does," Jason replied, raising his rifle. "Stay alert." Deep within the station, they discovered the heart of the superweapon, a massive chamber filled with glowing orbs connected by streams of energy. In the center stood a platform where sentient beings were suspended in stasis pods, their life forces feeding the machine. Emily stared in horror. "It's worse than we thought." Jason nodded grimly. "Then let's end it." But as they moved closer, alarms blared throughout the station. The Vraks knew they were there. Now, they weren't just fighting time. They were fighting for their lives. The alarms screamed through the station, piercing the eerie silence that had moments before felt suffocating. Jason Cole and Emily Dawson exchanged a glance, their expressions tense but determined. They knew what was coming next. "Move," Jason shouted, motioning for the team to take cover behind a row of consoles as the first wave of Vraks drones descended upon them. The machines moved with mechanical precision, their glowing red eyes scanning the area before opening fire. Sparks flew as energy blasts hit nearby surfaces, forcing the humans to dive for safety. Emily crouched low, clutching her toolkit tightly. Her mind raced, trying to figure out how to disable the superweapon while dodging enemy fire. "Jason, we don't have much time. If those pods keep feeding the machine, it'll overload." "I know," Jason replied, firing his rifle at an advancing drone. The shot hit its mark, sending the machine crashing to the ground. "Just give me a minute to clear some space." Captain Laura Hayes stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Focus on the task. We didn't come this far to fail now." With renewed determination, the team pressed on. Jason and two other soldiers provided covering fire, keeping the drones at bay while Emily worked frantically to access the control panel near the stasis pods. Her fingers flew over the alien interface, deciphering symbols and rerouting power flows. Sweat dripped down her forehead, but she didn't stop. "They're adapting," one of the soldiers warned as more drones poured into the chamber. These ones were larger, equipped with heavier weapons. Explosions rocked the platform, shaking the entire structure. "We can't hold them off forever." Another soldier yelled, narrowly avoiding a blast that left a scorch mark where he'd been standing moments earlier. Emily gritted her teeth, frustration building. Almost there, just a little more. Suddenly, a loud hum filled the air, and the orbs surrounding the chamber began to pulse faster. The energy streams connecting them grew brighter, almost blinding. Emily realized with dread what was happening. The weapon was charging. "Jason," she cried out, "it's activating. If we don't shut it down now, it'll wipe us all out." Jason cursed under his breath and turned to Hayes. "We need a distraction. Something big." Hayes nodded sharply. "Fall back. I'll draw their fire." Before anyone could protest, Hayes sprinted toward the center of the room, firing wildly to attract the drone's attention. Several of them broke away from the main group and chased after her, giving Emily precious seconds to finish her work. Her hands trembled as she entered the final sequence. A countdown appeared on the screen. 10 seconds until the weapon fired. 9, 8. Come on, she muttered, her heart pounding. 7, 6. The drones closed in, their weapons charging. Jason and the others fought desperately to protect her, but they were outnumbered and running low on ammunition. 5, 4. One of the soldiers fell, hit by a stray blast. Jason hesitated, torn between helping his teammate and guarding Emily. But Emily shouted, "Keep fighting. I've got this." 3, 2. With a final keystroke, Emily disabled the connection between the stasis pods and the Orcs. The pulsing lights dimmed, and the hum faded into silence. The weapon was offline. But the victory came at a cost. As the remaining drones turned their focus back to the humans, Jason spotted a squad of Vrax soldiers entering the chamber. They were bigger, stronger, and armed to the teeth. "We need to go. Now," Jason yelled, grabbing Emily's arm and pulling her toward the exit. Hayes joined them moments later, blood trickling from a cut on her cheek, but otherwise unharmed. Together, they retreated, blasting their way through the remaining enemies. Behind them, the station groaned ominously, its systems destabilizing without the superweapon to anchor it. As they reached the shuttle bay, Jason glanced back at the crumbling station. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to feel relief. They had done it. They had stopped the weapon. But the war was far from over. Once aboard the shuttle, Emily slumped into her seat, exhausted. "That was too close," she whispered. Jason placed a hand on her shoulder. "You saved us. Don't forget that." Hayes sat at the front of the shuttle, her face unreadable. She stared out at the stars, knowing the hardest battle still lay ahead. But for now, they had won this round. The shuttle rocked violently as it sped away from the collapsing station. Alarms blared inside the small craft, warning of structural damage and failing systems. Emily Dawson gripped her seat tightly, her knuckles white, while Jason Cole checked the controls to ensure they were still on course. Behind them, the station erupted in a blinding flash of light, sending shockwaves rippling through space. "That was too close," Emily muttered, her voice shaky. "If we'd been even a second slower." "We made it," Jason interrupted, though his tone lacked conviction. He glanced back at Captain Laura Hayes, who sat silently near the front of the shuttle, her gaze fixed on the destruction outside. Her expression was unreadable, but Jason could see the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. The rest of the team was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. Some nursed injuries, others stared blankly at the floor. They had succeeded in disabling the superweapon, but the cost had been high. Too many lives lost, too much sacrificed. And now, with the station gone, they were left wondering if it would truly make a difference. When the shuttle docked with the U.S. Invincible, the crew aboard greeted them with a mix of relief and sorrow. News of their success had already spread, but so had word of the losses suffered during the mission. As Jason stepped off the shuttle, he saw Major Ryan Carter waiting nearby, his face grim. "How bad is it?" Jason asked without preamble. Carter hesitated before answering. "We held them off for as long as we could, but the Vrax fleet regrouped faster than expected. Half our forces are pinned down, and reinforcements are stretched thin." Jason clenched his fists. "So all this might have been for nothing." "No," Hayes interjected firmly, joining the conversation. "The superweapon is gone. That gives us an edge. But we can't waste time celebrating. It's not over yet." Back on the bridge, the mood was tense. The holographic displays showed the remaining Vrax ships closing in, their formations tight and aggressive. Rachel Moore, the strategist, pointed to a cluster of red dots. "They're preparing for another assault. If we don't act soon, they'll overwhelm us." Hayes studied the map carefully, her mind racing. She turned to the crew. "We need to hit them hard and fast. Use everything we've got. If we can break their momentum, we might stand a chance." Emily approached hesitantly, her hands trembling slightly. "Captain, there's something you should know. The superweapon, it wasn't just powered by those pods. It was designed to amplify destruction exponentially. Even though we disabled it, the residual energy might still be unstable. If the Vrax figure out how to harness it again." "They won't," Hayes said sharply, cutting her off. "We destroyed the station. There's nothing left for them to use." But Emily didn't look convinced. What if they salvaged parts? What if they rebuilt it somewhere else? The room fell silent as everyone absorbed her words. Jason stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Emily's shoulder. We'll stop them before that happens. We have to. With no other options, Hayes gave the order to engage. The Invincible led the charge, its engines roaring as it surged toward the heart of the Vrax fleet. Shields flared as enemy fire rained down, but the humans fought back fiercely, unleashing salvos of missiles and energy blasts. Explosions lit up the void, turning the battlefield into chaos. Jason manned one of the weapon stations, his focus razor-sharp. Beside him, Emily monitored the ship's systems, ensuring they stayed operational despite the relentless assault. Every hit shook the vessel, but the crew held their ground. Then, suddenly, the tide began to shift. One by one, the Vrax ships faltered under the combined firepower of the human fleet. Their once coordinated attacks became scattered and desperate. For the first time in years, hope flickered in the hearts of the crew. But victory came at a price. As the last Vrax cruiser exploded in a fiery burst, Emily collapsed at her station, overcome by exhaustion. Jason rushed to her side, helping her sit up. "You did it," he said softly. "You saved us." Tears welled in her eyes as she looked around at the battered but triumphant faces of her comrades. "We did it," she corrected. "Together." On the bridge, Hayes watched the remnants of the Vrax fleet retreat, her expression unreadable. The war wasn't over, not yet, but for the first time, humanity had struck a decisive blow. And as the battlefield fell silent, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. They had paid dearly for this victory, but they had earned it. The U.S. Invincible drifted through the aftermath of battle, its hull scared and blackened from the fierce exchange with the Vrax fleet. Inside, the crew worked tirelessly to repair damage and tend to the wounded. The victory had been hard-fought, but it came at a heavy cost. Bodies were carried away, and tears flowed freely as soldiers mourned their fallen comrades. Jason Cole stood near one of the observation windows, staring out at the wreckage floating silently in space. Pieces of destroyed ships tumbled aimlessly, remnants of both human and Vrax vessels. The sight filled him with a mix of pride and sorrow. They had won, but it didn't feel like a true victory. Too many lives had been lost, too many sacrifices made. Behind him, Captain Laura Hayes approached quietly. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch firm but gentle. "You did good out there," she said softly. "We all did." Jason nodded without looking at her. "Does it ever get easier? Losing people?" Hayes hesitated, then shook her head. "No, it never does. But you learn to carry it, to honor them by keeping the fight alive." Her words offered little comfort, but Jason appreciated the sentiment. He turned to face her. "What happens now? Do we chase the Vrax back to their homeworld?" "For now, we regroup," Hayes replied. "Our forces are stretched thin, and the Invincible needs repairs before we can move again. But yes, eventually, we'll finish what we started." Before Jason could respond, Emily Dawson entered the room, her face pale but determined. She held a data pad in her hands, her expression troubled. "Captain, I need to show you something." They followed her to the engineering bay, where she projected a series of readings onto a large screen. The graphs showed residual energy spikes emanating from the debris field surrounding them. "This isn't normal radiation," Emily explained. "It matches the signature of the superweapon. Some parts must have survived the explosion." Jason frowned. "You think they can rebuild it?" "I don't know," Emily admitted. "But if even a fragment falls into their hands, they might try. We can't let that happen." Hayes crossed her arms, her jaw tightening. "Then we clean up the mess, gather whatever's left and destroy it completely." A team was quickly assembled for the dangerous task. Jason volunteered to lead, knowing how critical it was to ensure no trace of the weapon remained. As they prepared to board shuttles, Emily stopped him. "Be careful," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't handle losing anyone else." Jason forced a small smile. "We'll be fine. Trust me." Out among the wreckage, the team worked methodically, scanning for any signs of the superweapon's components. The silence was eerie, broken only by the occasional creak of metal or distant echo of drifting debris colliding. Every piece they found was carefully secured and brought back to the Invincible for disposal. But as they searched, Jason noticed something strange, a faint blinking light coming from a partially intact section of the station. He motioned for his team to follow him cautiously. Inside, they discovered a hidden compartment containing a single glowing orb, the core of the superweapon. "This is bad," one of the soldiers muttered, stepping back instinctively. Jason stared at the orb, his heart pounding. "We can't leave this here." Before anyone could act, a group of Vrax drones appeared, blocking their exit. The aliens had tracked them down, hoping to reclaim the core. Jason raised his rifle, shouting, "Fall back. Protect the orb." The ensuing fight was chaotic and brutal. Outnumbered and trapped, the humans fought with everything they had. Jason shouted orders, directing his team to cover each other while he grabbed the orb. It pulsed in his hands, its energy unstable and threatening to overload. "Jason, get out of there." Emily's voice crackled over the comms. "I'm trying." He yelled back, dodging blasts from the drones. One soldier stayed behind, holding off the enemy long enough for the others to escape. Jason saw the man go down but knew there was no time to stop. When they finally reached the shuttle, Jason handed the orb to Emily, who immediately began working to disable it. Her hands trembled as she connected wires and rerouted circuits. "If this thing goes off," she trailed off, unable to finish the thought. "It won't," Jason said firmly. "Not while we're still breathing." Back aboard the Invincible, the crew watched anxiously as Emily completed her work. With a final keystroke, the orb's glow faded, and the energy dissipated harmlessly. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. Emily slumped into her seat, exhausted but triumphant. "It's done. For good this time." Hayes stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've saved us all." But as the crew celebrated their narrow escape, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that the war was far from over. The Vrax would return, angrier and more desperate than ever. And when they did, humanity would need to be ready. The U.S. Invincible limped through space, its engines sputtering and shields flickering as it headed toward a nearby asteroid field for temporary refuge. The ship was battered, its crew exhausted, but their spirits were lifted by the knowledge that they had crippled the Vrax superweapon once and for all. Still, Captain Laura Hayes knew they couldn't afford to relax. Not yet. On the bridge, Hayes stood silently, watching the scanners as the asteroid field came into view. Her mind raced with plans. The Vrax fleet had retreated, but she doubted they would stay away for long. They needed time to regroup, repair, and prepare for whatever came next. For now, survival was their top priority. Jason Cole entered the bridge, his uniform torn and smeared with soot from the earlier battles. He looked worn out, but there was still fire in his eyes. "Captain," he said, saluting briefly. "Engineering reports the core systems are stable for now, but we'll need days, maybe weeks, to fully repair the damage." Hayes nodded. "Understood. Find us a safe spot in the asteroids. We'll use the cover to hide while we patch things up." As the ship navigated the rocky maze of the asteroid field, Jason joined Emily Dawson in the engineering bay. She was hunched over a console, running diagnostics on the ship's power grid. Her fingers moved quickly across the keys, her expression focused despite her obvious fatigue. "You should rest," Jason said gently. "You've done more than anyone could ask." Emily shook her head without looking up. "There's no time. If the Vrax come back before we're ready, we're dead. I can sleep later." Jason didn't argue. He understood her drive and shared it. Instead, he helped where he could, handing her tools or checking readings when she asked. Together, they worked late into the night, ensuring the ship remained operational. Meanwhile, Hayes met with Major Ryan Carter and Lieutenant Rachel Moore to discuss their next move. The mood in the room was somber. Everyone knew how close they'd come to losing everything. Yet, amidst the exhaustion, there was also resolve. "We've hit them hard," Carter said, pointing to a map of the region. "But they'll recover. And when they do, they'll come at us harder than ever." "Then we hit first," Hayes replied firmly. "We've weakened them. Now we strike at their homeworld, cut off their leadership, destroy their production facilities. Without those, they'll crumble." Rachel frowned. "It's risky. Their defenses will be stronger than anything we faced. Are we sure we're ready?" "We don't have a choice," Hayes said. "If we wait, they'll rebuild. This is our chance to end it." The plan was set. Once repairs were complete, the Invincible would lead an assault on the Vrax homeworld. It would be humanity's boldest move yet, a desperate gamble to bring the war to a decisive conclusion. Days passed, and slowly the ship began to heal. Crew members worked around the clock, repairing hull breaches, replacing damaged weapons, and reinforcing shields. Morale improved as progress was made, though the scars of battle remained etched on every face. Finally, the day arrived. The Invincible emerged from the asteroid field, its engines roaring with renewed strength. Hayes addressed the crew over the intercom, her voice steady and commanding. "This is it. Today we take the fight to them. Today we show them what humanity is made of. Stand proud, because history will remember this moment." As the fleet jumped into hyperspace, heading straight for the Vrax homeworld, Jason stood on the bridge beside Emily. She glanced at him, her lips curving into a faint smile. "Think we'll make it?" Jason hesitated, then nodded. "We have to, for everyone who didn't." The journey was tense, each second stretching longer than the last. When they dropped out of hyperspace near the Vrax homeworld, the sight before them was overwhelming. Massive orbital defenses surrounded the planet, bristling with weapons and ships. It looked impossible, but they had faced impossible odds before. Hayes gave the order, her voice cutting through the tension. "All hands, prepare for engagement. This is it. Make it count." The battle began with a deafening roar. Missiles streaked across space, lighting up the void like fireworks. Explosions erupted as human ships clashed with Vrax forces, neither side giving ground. Jason manned his station, firing relentlessly at the enemy, his heart pounding with adrenaline. Amidst the chaos, Emily monitored the ship's systems, shouting warnings whenever critical components were hit. "Shields at 40%. Hold together." And hold they did. Slowly, painfully, the humans pushed forward, breaking through layer after layer of defense. The Vrax fought fiercely, but humanity's determination proved unshakable. When the final barrier fell and the fleet descended toward the planet's surface, Jason allowed himself a brief moment of hope. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for victory. The battlefield fell eerily silent as the last Vrax cruiser exploded in a fiery burst, its wreckage tumbling toward the planet below. The humans had won. Against all odds, they had broken through the defenses of the Vrax homeworld and struck at the heart of their empire. The once mighty alien forces were now in disarray, their leadership shattered, and their war machine crippled. On the bridge of the U.S. Invincible, Captain Laura Hayes stood motionless, her eyes fixed on the view outside. The darkened skies of the Vrax homeworld stretched endlessly, dotted with drifting debris and fading explosions. For the first time in years, there was no sound of weapons firing, no alarms blaring, just silence. Jason Cole leaned against a console, his body heavy with exhaustion but his mind racing. He glanced at Emily Dawson, who sat quietly nearby, staring out at the stars. Her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly, but she wore a faint smile. They had done it. Together, they had achieved what everyone thought was impossible. Hayes finally turned to face her crew, her expression softening. "We did it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You all fought bravely, sacrificed everything, and proved that humanity cannot be broken. We owe this victory to every single one of you, and to those we lost along the way." A somber cheer rippled through the room, not loud or triumphant, but filled with relief and gratitude. Tears streamed down some faces, while others simply bowed their heads in quiet reflection. The cost of victory was written in every scar, every empty seat, every name etched into memory. Jason stepped forward, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "What happens now? Do we head home?" Hayes nodded slowly. "Yes, Earth is waiting for us. But our work isn't over yet. There will be rebuilding, healing, and making sure something like this never happens again." Emily looked up, her eyes glistening. Do you think people back home will understand what we went through? What we gave up?" "They'll know," Hayes replied firmly. "And they'll honor it. Because of you, humanity has a future." As the fleet prepared to leave the Vrak system behind, Jason wandered to the observation deck. He stared out at the vast expanse of space, thinking about everything they had endured. The battles, the losses, the moments of doubt. It felt surreal to stand here now, knowing it was finally over. Emily joined him after a while, her steps quiet. She didn't say anything at first, just stood beside him, gazing at the stars. Finally, she spoke. "I keep thinking about all the things I wanted to build after the war. Cities, schools, parks. Places where life could thrive instead of being destroyed." Jason smiled faintly. "You'll get to do all that. And more. This is just the beginning." She nodded, her smile growing stronger. "Yeah, maybe it is." Hours later, the fleet set course for Earth, leaving the ruins of the Vrak's empire far behind. The journey would take days, but no one complained. For the first time in years, they weren't running toward another battle. They were heading home. When the blue-green orb of Earth finally came into view, it brought tears to even the toughest soldiers' eyes. The planet was still scared from earlier attacks, but it was alive, vibrant, and full of promise. As the ships descended through the atmosphere, crowds gathered below, cheering and waving flags. News of the victory had spread quickly, and millions had come out to welcome their heroes. Captain Hayes stepped off the Invincible first, followed by Jason, Emily, and the rest of the crew. The roar of applause was deafening, but Hayes raised a hand, and the crowd quieted. She took a deep breath before speaking, her voice carrying across the field. "This victory belongs to all of us," she said. "To those who fought, those who waited, and those who gave everything so we could stand here today. Let this moment remind us of what we're capable of when we unite. Let it inspire us to build a better tomorrow, for ourselves, and for generations to come." As the crowd erupted into cheers once more, Jason glanced at Emily. She was smiling brighter than he'd ever seen, her eyes shining with hope. For the first time in years, the weight of the war lifted, replaced by the promise of peace. And as Jason looked around at the faces of his crew, his friends, his family, he knew they had truly triumphed. Not just in battle, but in spirit. Humanity had faced its darkest hour and emerged stronger than ever.